Hello Internet, and today's video is going to be another book opinion, those videos in which I tell you my opinion on a book, and today's book is going to be Fearless by Cornelia Funke. This is the second in her Mirror World series. I have done a video explaining my feelings on the first. Some of those feelings translate, so if you want a bigger idea of how I feel about the series as a whole, go watch that video. So this continues not directly after we left off, but we know it's not that far. So at the end of Reckless, we learned that Jacob had to learn the Dark Fairy's name so that he could get his brother transformed back into a human from one of the rock creatures. So his brother would no longer be Jade and go back to being a fleshy human. But he unknowingly also had traded his life for his brother's. By learning the Dark Fairy's name, he ends up getting a curse put on him, and this is basically the Red Fairy's revenge for him breaking up with her so long ago that we never learned the real story of what happened, other than he dipped out on her one day after they slept together and just never returned. And because most fairies don't leave Fairy Island, she never went back to find him, and that was her revenge. So now he's on this whole long quest to try to find at least one item that can save his life, because he has this moth on his chest, and each time it hurts, he loses a little piece of the fairy's name, and eventually once he loses all 6 letters of the fairy's name, that moth will rip off his skin and basically he'll just die. That's it. So he's trying to figure out any way that can help him live. So this book begins in the human world and not in the mirror world, and if you remember, my complaints about Reckless is that it's a portal fantasy, right? I wanted to see more of this other world. I wanted to see more of the mirror world. So I was really disappointed when it started on Earth. It was boring, right? Because it started on Earth and it was basically Jacob Reckless has been trying for so many months to try to figure out a way for him to survive. He went to search out this and this and this and this, and it just tells you all this stuff. And now here he is on Earth trying to find a genie bottle so that he can get this red genie, and maybe that will help. So we get to see the full story of the genie bottle on Earth, but all of these more fascinating looking stories of him going to find all those other things, but they didn't work, or they were in a well of healing that was empty, and all of that sort of stuff. Those were mentioned, but the boring Earth thing where he goes to an auction, that's mentioned, and we have to sit through all the details of that. It was just, it was so irritating. I understand why they did it, because there was a character introduced there that comes back later and is helpful, but still, it was really, really boring. We don't see much of Will or Claire or any of the characters introduced. They're mentioned, and then Jacob goes back to the portal world, and we meet Fox again, and we go and talk to Fox. Now, once we get back into the portal world, it's a lot more entertaining, it's a lot more fun. It turns out Jacob has one last chance. There is this special crossbow that belonged to a warlock, and there is a myth that this crossbow, it can kill armies, because as long as you kill the general with this crossbow, all of his lowers will also die, and all the people that he commands will also die. And it also has the benefit that if you shoot it with a certain intention or whatever, it won't kill you, but instead will heal you. Jacob wants to find this crossbow because he's hoping that if he shoots himself with it, he will be healed. The moth won't be trying to rip out of his body and kill him, and he will defeat the fairy's curse. So him and Fox go on this whole big adventure and this whole quest, because the warlock's pieces, his body pieces, are strewn across the mirror world, and they're trying to figure out where all these pieces are, put them back together to get this crossbow. Except they're also in a race against time, not only because Jacob is slowly dying with each letter that he forgets, but because there's another rock creature who is also a treasure hunter, who him and Jacob, throughout years of Jacob being a treasure hunter, they've been competing back and forth trying to discover different things, and they both have great reputations. So this guy is also on the track to find this crossbow. So him and Jacob have like this little competition going on to figure out who's going to get it first. So this was a lot more entertaining because we actually got to see more of the mirror world. We got to see more of the characters and the environment of the mirror world and how it all worked out, and it was a lot more entertaining. There was a lot more, like, you got to see all these quest things going on, all of the things Jacob had to do to complete a quest, rather than it just being said Jacob went and did this and we never get to see how he did it, how he accomplished it. There are still certain points in which there are things mentioned that he did in the past. We never get backstories that are sufficient enough or anything like that. But at least in this, we're more involved with the mirror world. We're not really talking about Earth anymore. And I really didn't get why we talked about Earth, because even Jacob mentions it a few times. His real world, the world he believes he belongs to, is the mirror world. That is his home. Yet we constantly have to remember, like, Earth, and I'm just like, but this is a portal fantasy. Why are we talking about a place that you don't even like? So there was that, and like, I think that was the biggest drawback. Just, I wanted to focus more on the portal fantasy, and thankfully this book did more of that. But there was also points where it was more, I'm going to tell you this happened versus show you what's happening. And it really, like, drew back the story, especially when you actually got to see what was happening. It was really exciting and fun. So it made it more noticeable every time you weren't allowed to join Jacob on his adventures, but you were just told that he went on one. So Fearless, I think I'm going to keep this book. I definitely prefer it versus the first one. I'm assuming that this series continues, but this is as far as I own, and I'm not really interested in continuing. I think, like, the building of the mirror world is really fascinating. It's a really fascinating world. It's nice to see how, like, everything works together and fits together. But it really, like, it's really disappointing when you're just told that this crazy awesome adventure happens, but you never really get to see it. And that happens so often that you just kind of feel left out, and you're just like, well, I want to see what he did and what happens, and it doesn't really sound like. It's kind of disappointing when you just get one or two lines that says, Jacob did something completely amazing over there, but let's not talk about that. Let's talk about this other thing. And it's like, well, then why did you, like, mention it? Like, you know, like, I get why it was mentioned. I just wish we could have had at least a little delving into those other quests that are just casually mentioned and then tossed away, where I would have just liked to see what was going on. So this was definitely better than the first, simply because I got to see more of the portal world. I got to see more of the characters in this portal world, their interactions, more of Jacob's life in this portal world. But I was still really irritated that I only got told some of the quest and adventures Jacob went on, and instead of actually just getting a glimpse to see these adventures that Jacob went on. This was a book that I read. I fairly enjoyed it. Honestly, I just really like this cover, which I'm amazed that they did such a great job on this cover when the first book has just such atrocious covers. But I'm just really intrigued by Mothmen and like this sort of imagery and the imagery of moths. I think they're really cool looking. So I definitely like this cover, and I'm just kind of really sad that I didn't get enough Portal World fantasy that I would have liked. So comment down below if you know any other Portal World books that you would suggest I would read. I've already read Every Heart a Doorway and all of that, and just other Portal Worlds things that I could potentially read and enjoy, because I really do like Portal fantasies, but for some reason I don't see a lot of them, and I don't know like where I'm supposed to look to find all of these Portal fantasies, but I would like to potentially read more. So if you like what you're seeing here and you want to continue to see more, click all those buttonys down below, and goodbye, Internet.